Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. I am your host, Stewart Heath, founder and CEO of Harvard Grace Capital. We are very blessed to have Dr. Joe Pazona join us today, and thank you for taking the time. Every physician I know is incredibly busy, and so we value your time here, and we're grateful that you're sharing yours with us. Thanks for joining us.
Well, you are welcome. It is my pleasure to be here and hopefully help some folks out.
Great. So I generally ask the same 5 questions to everyone, and you know they're open-ended enough that who knows where it will take us. But as you think back over your time, is there a game-changing moment that puts you on the path to where you are now versus where you thought you were going? Maybe you want to be an astronaut, but now you're an MD or something like that. Tell us about how you got here.
Yeah, I think probably be more interesting to actually start in the middle of my career is really my biggest game-changing moment because, I stumbled into medicine as a kid. No doctors in my family. I was a good student, so it meant I was either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I volunteered with a local hospital, did some pre-medical classes, and said, "Oh, this seems pretty neat," and was fortunate enough to get into a medical program. So, relatively, boring, not very eventful sort of story going in. But if I have to think about the pivotal moment as to where I am today, it's the day I was actually fired by a healthcare system. I was an employee of a hospital system, and I was recruited there to start a brand new urology department. And it was one of those where a lot of promises were made and a lot of assumptions were made on both of our ends. And ultimately, one day got pulled in for my annual review and said, Joe, you're a great urologist. You take great care of patients, but you just don't fit in here. And so if you see this little clause in your contract that says either party can walk away with a 180-day notice, well, we're going to put that in today. And if you say a single bad word about our hospital, we will escort you off the property immediately with cause. Thank you and have a great day and best of luck. And so here I was, I'm a father of 3 children and the sole provider. And I've put my heart and soul into my craft and profession. And everything that I was advocating for that, quote, didn't make me fit in was crazy things like competent people to answer phones, a practice manager who oversaw the operations and administration of a medical practice while I was busy doing complex robotic surgeries. And listen, there's no doubt that as physicians, we get a terrible, if not non-existent education in operations and business. But nonetheless, it's hard for anyone else to truly know what I do on a daily basis unless you're a physician. Mm-hmm. And so to feel like I dedicated so much and everything I was doing was from a place of what's best for my patients, and that was rewarded with what essentially amounted to a pink slip, it was definitely a low point. But the silver lining of that, what transpired was that it opened my eyes beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had to take control of my career and profession moving forward, that nobody was going to care as much about my patients as I was, and that I needed to create a situation both professionally and therefore personally so that I was immune to anything like this ever happening again. And so that really started my entrepreneurial journey. And I think that's really where kind of life has gotten excited for me. At the age of, I was in my early 40s at that time, and I've been on that journey now. That conversation happened in September of 2018, if my math is right. So it's 6+ years now, and it's been great.
Well, I have to say that that's similar to a lot of our entrepreneurial. It their entrepreneurial vision started the day they got fired. But not everybody, most people would just go run get another job. And because becoming an entrepreneur is, it, there's nothing glorious about it. It's just they're different people. They're different people, and I always joke. I read a study about a year ago that it says the rate of incidents of ADD in entrepreneurs is like 10 times that of the general population. So maybe there's an element of mental illness amongst us too.
Not going to argue with you there.
Yeah, so it is interesting. How has owning your own practice impacted how you practice medicine?
Well, what I tell anyone who's considering this path is, the good news is you get to make every decision. The bad news is you have to make every decision. And in the end, every night you're looking at the four-letter word across from you in the mirror going, why did you do that? Yeah. So I think what it's taught me is, several lessons. Number one, you can't be everything to everyone, and that there's a power in saying no to certain things so you can say yes to other things. And I think I learned this through a number of readings, and I think we could look at a business like Southwest Airlines as a perfect example of a company that says no to certain things, first class tickets, assigned seating, so they can say yes to speedier, typically less expensive flights between cities. And so as a physician, we're taught, oh, we could just do everything. And I love it when I go to a doctor's website and they go, we are experts in, and then they have the accordion open up of all the things they claim they're experts at. And I go, that's BS. There's no way you can truly be an expert by the true definition at all of those things. So first lesson is I've had to say no to certain things so I could say yes to others. So for me, that meant, I had to say no to taking ER call and doing major surgeries moving forward. Because when I started out as a solo practitioner, if I had one single night where I'd be up in the ER or taking a patient back to the operating room because of a complex surgery, and if you do complex surgeries, bad things are just going to happen even if you're a good surgeon, that would ruin my whole next day of ability of performing well for those patients, and I'd be all they had. So, I had to say no to those, extra several $1,000 checks to take ER call and, potentially building up my practice quicker. So I could say yes to a well-rested, better version of myself so I could be better for the patients that I had. I had to say no to doing some major surgeries so I could really focus on what I thought I could build up as a business, which is really men's and women's health. So I don't do a lot of cancer work anymore. And I happily send that out to someone who is an expert here in town. And so, that's, I think, one major lesson you learn as you start that sort of entrepreneurial journey. And it's changed the way I've practiced in that sense. Otherwise, I don't think it changed too much because I was always looking, Stewart, for that place that fit with how I wanted my patients to be treated. But because I was always an employee, I was stuck with whatever culture that company had, whoever they hired, whatever their processes or lack thereof were, from answering phones to checking out patients. And so finally I could create and mold the practice around what I thought would be an exceptional patient experience. So I think it's more a matter of I took what I always was trying to accomplish and it now just put me in the driver's seat to make it happen.
Well, it seems to me that as a young entrepreneur, you were able to capture some pretty good wisdom. As a young CPA, for myself and starting my own business, and I was 24 years old or something like that. I was saying yes to everything, and I realized several years into this is dumb. But then then I had a young family and I was like I just got to keep doing it. So so very wise to make those tough calls, and I'm sure it wasn't easy to say,
No.
"Oh, I'm not going to do the big surgeries anymore." But it was a smart thing to do. So
Yeah, I certainly had to put my ego aside, and I wasn't quite 24. I started this journey. I started the practice in 2020, and at that point, I was 43 years old, so maybe even a little later to the game. And I've tried to learn from others. I've tried to just consume, whether it's via books, podcasts, phone calls with generous people. I wanted to learn those mistakes ahead of time because I don't have a business background. I was not a physician who came from an entrepreneurial family. I did not get an MBA. I mean, I really was a craftsman as a physician first and foremost. I certainly had ideas of how I thought things should be, but I had to get really humble. And you have to have a humility, which is hard as a physician because we're taught how great we are from the moment we're a straight A student to we get beat down a bit in residency, but we all know those doctors who think that they walk on water. And, as a surgeon, I'm constantly humbled, and certainly in business, that has increased the humility tenfold because there's so much I don't know. And so it's been fun to kind of relearn. I mean, I think, you don't go into medicine if you don't like learning. I mean,
right.
I tell my kids, I go, "How long were you in school?" I said, "Well, it's 13 years after high school." That's a long road, but yet
Yeah, yeah.
seemingly most of my colleagues, you kind of get out into the real world and you stop learning. You keep practicing medicine the same way. You don't learn business. You don't learn technology. I mean, how many doctors have we met who are these curmudgeons, regardless of their age, who just keep doing things the same way they did 5, 10 years ago? And
I have no
so
idea what you're referring to. So.
right, exactly. I'm sure no one listening to this has ever encountered that sort of doctor. So yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I'm reinvigorated to learn again, and I can't consume enough. And so it's been fun to kind of dive into the business world and then apply it through the lens as a physician.
Well, again, that's a trait of almost every entrepreneur that I've interviewed, and only had the podcast a short amount of time, but I practiced accounting for 30 plus years, and almost all of my clients were entrepreneurs, and they were all lifelong learners. And most of them just craved learning. I mean, it was almost, you could say some of them were, it was actually an obsession. If you got to have an addiction, that'd be a good one to have. But so that's interesting to me that you're saying that. So and that actually leads me to my next question. What do you do to stay current, both in medicine and in your business? And are there particular books that you're fans of? Is there a website you frequently go to, podcasts? What methods do you use to stay current?
So I would say most of my education at this point is really more in the business side of things. I at this point am probably seeing patients about 1 day a week, and we really haven't even further narrowed down the niche of our practice to men's and women's health. And I've got a women's health expert who's exclusively doing that. I have another urologist who's with me. So I'm really a vasectomist at this point, and the chief cheerleading officer when it comes to my team when I'm in the office. But nonetheless, I still go to conferences and have frequent conversations with colleagues to stay up to date because medicine is constantly changing.
Yeah.
And I would say in the healthcare realm, I'm really interested more in the creation of health rather than the management of sickness, which is a complete paradigm shift because
Yes.
everything from the day we enter medical school is package up a bunch of symptoms as an illness, code it, and treat with a pill or surgery. But yet instead, if we look at the fact that 80–90% of chronic diseases are diseases of lifestyle, really most of my consumption now is from people like Dr. Peter Attia with The Drive, or Dr. Andrew Huberman with his podcast. Just read a great book, Good Energy by Dr. Casey Means. People who really get that what we eat, how we move our body, how we sleep, how we optimize our hormones and our stress levels really are the true determinants of health. And it's not, here's a pill for your erectile dysfunction or your enlarged prostate. So that's really self-driven, because you don't get that when you go to a medical conference. Urologists are not talking about that. They're talking about, for the 8,000th time, another study about prostate cancer that in the end doesn't move the needle. But yet obesity is one of the major risk factors for prostate cancer. No one talks about it. In terms of business, I certainly have, I could turn my camera here and show you my bookcase. My wife would jokingly say, is the Amazon guy here again with another book? So I'm trying to be a little bit less in the purchasing side and more in the revisiting side of certain books, because I think there's been certain books that have been really fundamental, and a couple I've gone back to. One is The One Thing by Gary Keller, who simply asks the question, what is the one thing I can do such that doing so everything else will get easier or these problems will disappear? A very simple yet profound question, and he puts it in a much more eloquent way than I just did, and pulls it into real life scenarios, whether it be personal life or professional life. So, that's a book that I frequently recommend or gift to people. One I've recently kind of gone back to, because we're definitely in growth mode as we've relaunched our practice, is The One-Page Marketing Plan by Alan Dibb. I'm a psychology major. I love marketing and copywriting and persuasion, and just thinking of ways to effectively message to people, because marketing and sales gets this very sleazy undertone, especially in healthcare. There are doctors who think you should never market or sell anything, and as I explained to my team, we aren't selling anything either. We are building awareness, because there are people out there with many problems: fatigue, low energy, weight gain, lack of confidence, depression, multiple medical illnesses. And they're raising their hand saying, help me. And I know we have solutions that can help. So I would argue that if you have a great solution, especially in healthcare, you have a moral obligation to do marketing and sales right. And that's through education, and it's through helping people walk through their mindset and change it. It's not being a sleazy, and if you buy today. So, that's a book I recently revisited, but, I bounce around.
For the price of one. So
yeah, exactly. And if you buy today. So, those are a couple books that have been instrumental. In terms of podcasts, I love the Tim Ferriss show. I think the way he can deconstruct world-class performers from all walks of life. I like learning from people outside of medicine, because I really don't think anybody is doing healthcare right from soup to nuts. I think we're finally, like I said, seeing this paradigm shift with people who are looking at wellness creation instead of sick care. But in terms of delivering that in a packageable, consumable way to as many people as possible, and then having an office where you get a fantastic experience from the first phone call to the checkout, I don't think that exists. And I tell my team all the time, our competition is not the practice down the street. It is Disney, it is Zappos, it is Chick-fil-A. Places that do an extraordinary job at creating unreasonable hospitality. Another great book by Will Guidara that I've come back to. So that's kind of really where my mind is. I'm looking at how can I best get across the great things that we can help patients with, how to create that world-class experience while staying on the top of healthcare, knowing we have to create health and stop treating illness.
Does that make you a concierge doctor?
Concierge doctor is an interesting term. The way I sort of look at concierge in healthcare is it makes it seem as if it's not attainable for the large majority of people. And from that standpoint, I don't think we're a concierge practice, and I don't like the definition.
Okay.
We have, as I shared with you before we jumped on the podcast, opted out of insurance to opt in with our patients. And really, when I look at what most of our patients were going through financially, even if they had insurance, they were still paying full price.
Yes.
And not only that, the amount of work it created for my team made it such that I couldn't be as good at delivering healthcare, nor could my team members. So back to that initial principle, I was saying yes to insurance and I was saying no to a truly exceptional patient experience because I had to employ so many people to understand the complex spider web and to explain to patients what their bill may or may not be. And
Right.
then hope 60 days later, I'd get a $60 check for spending an hour with you. It's just not sustainable. So, I think what we've done is we've opted out of insurance is we finally have put an appropriate value for the time and the service we deliver with our patients. Now, I certainly understand not everybody can afford that.
Yeah.
And I wish, and I'm sorry for that. I really wish I could run a sustainable, profitable business and serve everyone. It's just not possible. And that's why, if anyone's wondering why their local doctor's retired, why everybody is selling their practice to a hospital system or private equity, it's because of the dirty little secret no one's telling you about. You cannot make a single dollar in profit just seeing patients. And I'm not saying this from the doctor who's got the Lamborghini and wants a McLaren. You literally cannot pay your overhead with what insurance companies are paying practices these days, and that all the money is being made on drugs, surgeries, CAT scans. Just do things to patients, order more tests, do more surgeries, and own things, and then you can be profitable. But from just seeing patients, the just aren't there, and I don't think most people realize that. So I don't think we're a concierge practice. We're certainly not for everybody, and I understand that. My goal is to help foster an alternative ecosystem that excludes insurance and at scale can make it profitable while still serving patients. And there's plenty of patients now in our current model we see for free. I'm happy to see them because guess what? I was seeing people for free with insurance. I just had a hope I was going to get paid. So, now
and
at least
you don't have the expense of administrating insurance. But well, you're preaching to the choir here, man. I'm like, go, go, go. I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader here. I mean, I think the insurance companies, along with Medicare, have finally got the doctors where they want them. Which is essentially employees. And, we may have the best healthcare system in the world, but that don't make it a great system. So, and it's unfortunate. So, because I think people go to school for 13 years after high school because they want to help people.
Yeah.
And then you get out to a system that seems to be completely organized to not help people. The doctors are tired because they have to see 6 or 8 people an hour, 5 days a week, maybe 5.5, and the patients don't feel like they've been seen or heard because you got 4.5 minutes with your physician. And so it's it's not a good system. I applaud you for trying to get out there and change it and do something different. And it looks like it's working for you. So this is a podcast about entrepreneurs and successful people. And without any numbers or account numbers or whatever, I do like to pivot to see how our entrepreneurs invest their personal cash, what kind of asset classes. I'm sure you're heavily invested in pharmaceuticals and insurance companies. So,
it's funny you say that. I saw a statistic whereby if as a physician, like the day I entered medical school, if instead I just took my whole tuition and I put it into the stock of United Healthcare, and just let it ride and skipped all this schooling, the amount of money I would have is obscene. I mean, it's just so. Wow. Funny you bring that up.
What a concept! I mean,
right. So
yeah, I mean that's very tangible thing, that tuition that got shelled out to
Yeah.
the med schools. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
are you particular to any particular asset classes? I mean, do you like stocks and bonds, or are you a crypto guy, or do you think Beanie Babies are going to make a comeback? So, yeah, what's your answer to personal wealth building?
So I'm going to steal a term from Alex Hormozy, another guy I love in terms of consuming business and learning how to build a company. I'm 100% invested in the S&Me 500. And by that, every dollar I have is going back into my company and into my personal development to be a better CEO, a better leader, first and foremost. We recently have shifted to this out of network model, really, because although we've had 1,000 5-star reviews and we're the top rated medical practice at Pazona MD in the entire Southeast, to be frank, we're not profitable because we spent time with people and because I didn't push needless surgeries. Now I have another business related on the sort of telemedicine and rural health side that has been profitable to help us, even out those losses. But, the way I look at it at this point, Stuart, is I'm not cash flow positive to a point where I can stock money away. I've got, to be candid, 3 kids and an ex-wife. So my expense to cash flow ratio isn't the best right now, if I can be perfectly vulnerable. But I really look at it as the times I've tried to dabble in crypto, the times I've tried to even invest in healthcare startups, put some more money aside in some index funds, I've always found that I'm just not good at it. And I think it's a classic doctor who, you dabble in something and you kind of get burned and you're impatient. And so you put some money in, you take it out too soon, or you just don't time it right. And we all know you've got to put it in an unemotional way, like Warren Buffett, and let it sit there for a while. Now, Fortunately, when I was an employee, I maxed out every retirement fund that I could. I started at age 16 of putting even $50 away in a T. Rowe Price mid-cap growth fund. And I did that and increased it through even college and medical school. So that built up a nice little brokerage fund. I invested in Roth IRAs when I could. I put a lot of money aside in my children's 529 college plan. So luckily I do have a solid sort of base right now. But really the way I look at it is, I'm a subject matter expert in healthcare, and I'm going to do everything I can to put all my resources and thought and energy into that. And then once I hopefully, knock on wood, in the next 12 months or so, start seeing some of that cash flow, I'm going to go to someone smart like you or another financial advisor and say, all right, what do you recommend? How do I best diversify my funds? Because I think if I start playing part-time financial guy, it's just not going to go well. I'm smart enough to know my weaknesses, and that's one of them. And I've had to get much more disciplined with the numbers, even with my business, because as I built the business as a full-time urologist, and I was hyper focused on hiring the right people, just keeping the doors open, doing our marketing. You can imagine the hundreds of decisions I'd have to make a week. I had to outsource and trust others with our bookkeeping and taxes and finances, and and then do it in a complex web of the insurance accounts receivable. I couldn't even have an accurate P&L statement or any sort of cash flow document because we didn't even know how much money was coming in or was owed to us. And so that's definitely a focus for this year. And we've got the right people and we've got the right now is, we've got to understand the data and the numbers of our business and really focus on cash flow first and foremost. Because, we built up our practice to, almost $5 million in revenue last year, but, we spent almost as much when all is said and done just to deal with all the complexities. So that's really my focus, is positive cash flow with the business. And then when I've got all debts paid off and I've got some extra cash, I'll reach out to you and see where I should put my money.
Well, and as a true entrepreneur, they tend to bet on themselves first and invest in their own business, which I'm sure it will have a good return for you in that. And so totally respect what you're saying, and I think you're doing the right thing. So, all right, last question. If you had one nugget of advice for someone that you're either mentoring or just wanted to follow in your footsteps, what would that one nugget of advice be?
Take action. You are going to overestimate the risk of making that move and underestimate the risk of staying idle. I think this is the primary thing that holds back most physicians. We forget that there are only 1 million physicians in this country. And if you look at probably practicing, it's probably closer to 750 to 800,000. The doctor-patient relationship is the core economic engine of healthcare. If a doctor does not see a patient, the entire house of cards and $4.6 trillion of waste comes crumbling down. But yet, as physicians, we feel like we have on these golden handcuffs in these employed positions, and we sell out to private equity. We join that hospital. We give up all autonomy. We keep accepting that we have to click another button and dictate another thing in our note that's completely meaningless, that we should be up after hours for no pay, responding to every single patient message that comes through, rather than hiring a $10 an hour virtual assistant from the Philippines to help out. You have the power. You have the power if you just take the action. And listen, as a kid who grew up in lower middle class downstate New York with no business background and who has no business running a practice, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I was forced into it because of my life situation. I didn't have the chance to be fearful or thoughtful. Well, I just didn't have a choice. If I didn't make this leap, my children would not be able to go to college, or I'd have to be apart from them and be miserable in some other employed position. And so when you take that action, you realize like this business is not difficult. It's quite, well, let me say this. It's difficult. It's not complex. We miss up simple versus complex, easy versus difficult. It is difficult, but it is super simple. The concepts are not difficult. Learning cardiopulmonary physiology and how neurons work, that's complex. You gotta be really smart to understand that. I don't understand it. That's why I'm a plumber. So, but when it comes to business concepts, they're simple. You can learn them. If you went through medical school, trust me, you can learn how to run a business. Now, it's gonna be hard because you're gonna deal with people, because you have to learn patience, because unlike as a surgeon, I make a decision and I see immediate results. I make a decision in business, and I don't know if it's going to work maybe for 6 months. And right. So you won't ever get to that chance if you don't take that action. And so I think one of the best pieces of advice I had heard, and I think plenty of people have said this, is, imagine yourself at 80, 85 years old, you're sitting on the front porch with your loved one, you're holding hands, and you're looking back upon your life. Are you going to regret the fact that you just stayed as an employed, miserable physician, and that what impact that had on your family? Or are you going to take that action and reach out to someone like me and the people I reached out to know that this can be done, and to go create a better practice, a better patient experience, a better place for you, for your future employees, for future partners, for everybody? Because you can do that. And that otherwise, if you're sitting idle, I think you're just part of the problem. Because as long as there are doctors who are willing to sit idle, guess what? Insurance companies and big pharma and hospital systems are going to keep taking advantage of you. And in today's day and age, every doctor who's employed is being taken advantage of. And so I think you've got to take that leap of faith, and it's not as scary as you think, and there's people here to help.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for those doctors, I would just add there are millions of patients who would like to see you and spend more than 4.5 minutes with you. So because you guys got something that we all need. So Thank you. That's great advice. Taking action. Hey, in my mind, you're no longer first and foremost a doctor. You're an entrepreneur, man. You talk the talk and you're walking the walk. I love it. So thank you for taking time out and being with us today. And thank you to the audience for watching our podcast, and be sure to tune in for the next one. We will put Dr. Pazona's contact information in the show notes. And so thanks for everybody for watching today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.